Imagine this, one day in America, they suddenly ban Amazon, or Walmart, or any business that sells goods. Not just shut them down, they make the very idea of private trade illegal. Now imagine that inside this system, people still find a way to sell, quietly, at night, risking everything, and somehow, they make millions. In a country where private business was illegal, there were still people making millions. Their names, Siegfried Gassenfranz and Isaac Singer. They weren't supposed to exist. And yet, they drove Rolls-Royces. They stashed their cash in 3-liter jars, buried underground. And they operated right under the authorities' noses. This wasn't fiction. Two ordinary Soviet craftsmen built an underground empire where none should have existed. And in the end, they paid the ultimate price. They were executed. And the Rolls-Royce, it was kept. A government official, the very one who had protected them for years, drove that car to work every single day for years. It's 1956. You're living in America, but it looks nothing like it does today. Amazon doesn't exist not because it hasn't been invented yet, but because the government has made it a crime. No Walmart, no Target, no eBay, no Etsy, no Shopify. No side hustles, no freelancing, not even a small shop on the corner. The government decides what gets made, how much, who gets it, and when. You need a winter coat, you go to the only state-run store in town. If they don't have your size, you get put on a list, and you wait. Want to start a business? Sell furniture out of your garage. Make and sell anything at all? That's not a misdemeanor, not a fine, that's prison. Now imagine 250 million people living inside that system. They all need things. None of them can get what they need. So what happens? You already know the answer, because human nature doesn't change just because something is illegal. Someone, somewhere, still finds a way. His name was Siegfried Gassenfranz. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't connected to the KGB. He wasn't born into money or power. He was a foreman's assistant at the Alameda knitwear factory in Frunze, a quiet Soviet city most people in Moscow had never even heard of. But here's what made Siegfried different. After his official shift ended, he didn't go home to watch state television. He wrote, in a worn-out notebook he carried in his jacket pocket. He began to lay out his own philosophy. Ideas like, every person has the right to choose what they wear, and a man who creates something of value hasn't stolen, he's contributed. He didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as someone solving a problem the state had created and refused to solve. His partner was Isaac Singer, a master weaver at another factory. Same city, same frustration, same question, but Isaac was different. Siegfried wrote philosophy. Isaac counted money. Isaac loved that feeling, walking into a restaurant and having the chef come out personally to ask, "What else can I get you?" He loved that feeling more than anything in the world. To completely different men, one shared question: why can't we do this ourselves? In 1955, they set out to build an underground empire in the Soviet Union. Step 1. Capital. Gassenfranz and Singer drained their savings and borrowed from every friend willing to take the risk. Step 2. Equipment. 10 spinning machines, bought in Czechoslovakia and brought in legally on paper as personal property. No one asked questions, not yet. Step 3. Location. Their partner, Matvey Goldman, a shop supervisor at the factory, gave them the keys to an abandoned bus garage on factory grounds. It had been sitting empty, gathering dust. Now it had a night shift. The second paycheck was 3, 4, sometimes 5 times higher than the official one. In a country where an average worker earned 80 to 120 rubles a month, where a car cost 5,000 rubles and required years of waiting in line, this wasn't just extra money, it was an entirely different life. 2 years later, the accountant of their underground empire, a man named Yefim Abramovich, walked into one of their meetings in a back room and said one number: 1 million rubles. Adjusted for today's purchasing power, that's tens of millions of dollars, and that was only the beginning. A small workshop turned into a network, abandoned military hangars, decommissioned machines bought as scrap metal, new workers, new shifts, new goods. More than 150 people inside the organization. And every one of them knew, if anyone talked, everyone would go to prison, or worse. No business of this scale runs without protection. Low-level officials received money and goods. Police inspections were quietly cancelled, factory audits came back with clean numbers. But the crown jewel of their corruption scheme was Beksan Dayashaliyev, the chairman of the State Planning Committee of the Kyrgyz SSR, the man who controlled what was officially produced across the entire republic. He knew the real numbers, and he made sure no one suspected a thing. At its peak, the operation brought in 400,000 rubles in net profit per year, equivalent to millions of dollars today. And then they started spending it. This is where smart people make fatal mistakes. Hasan Frats built a mansion, hired servants, a private office, a laboratory in a separate wing, where he spent his nights writing his philosophy. He bought his wife diamonds, real ones, the kind that required connections to foreign markets. And then he did the one thing that sealed his fate. He found a contact through foreign diplomats and bought a used Rolls-Royce. Let's put that into context. A Rolls-Royce back then cost about $15,000 in today's money. Sounds cheap for a Rolls, right? But the average Soviet family earned about $500 a year in purchasing power. In a city where most people walked, where owning any car meant 5 years in a government queue, a Rolls-Royce wasn't transportation. It was like parking a private jet in a city where everyone rides bicycles. It was a flare shot straight at Moscow. Singer was no different. Weekends at the finest Soviet resorts, champagne, lavish dinners. Tips so large that waiters stayed up counting the money until morning because the tips alone exceeded what most Soviet citizens earned in a month. Their money was so vast, so impossible to spend fast enough, that millions of rubles along with foreign currency were stored in glass jars buried in the ground in their backyards. Rumors about their operations started to spread and eventually reached Moscow. Someone told Khrushchev, the absolute ruler of the Soviet Union. They say he didn't take it well. January 10, 1962, 2 in the morning. Investigators arrived from Moscow, not the local police they'd been on the payroll for years, not regional officials they'd been looking the other way for years. Federal investigators, the kind who don't take envelopes. The kind Moscow sends when the message is, "It ends tonight." In one coordinated operation, Hasan Frats, Singer, and dozens of their associates were arrested simultaneously at the same hour, across different parts of the city. No one could make a call, no one could run. No one could destroy a single piece of evidence. The searches uncovered everything. Glass jars filled with cash dug up from the ground, diamonds, ledgers, and worst of all, a perfectly preserved set of accounting records for an underground corporation the Soviet Union officially claimed did not exist. The total value seized was estimated at 2.5 to 3.5 million rubles. In today's purchasing power, that's tens of millions of dollars, and that was only what they found. The trial began in March 1962. The Supreme Court of the USSR was physically brought to Frunze not because the local courts couldn't handle it, but because the verdict had to be final, unappealable, message sent to every corner of the country. Hasan Frats stood up and laid out his defense. He said, "We didn't steal from the state. The machines were bought with our own money. The raw materials were bought with our own rubles. We hired people. We paid them fairly. We made things people desperately needed, things the state promised to provide, but didn't." The court wasn't interested. Their crime wasn't theft. Their crime was the very existence of private enterprise inside a system that had declared private enterprise impossible. They didn't just break the law, they proved the system was wrong. And in the Soviet Union, that was the only unforgivable offense. The death penalty for economic crimes had been abolished. It was reinstated specifically for this case. 21 people were sentenced to death, executed, and had their property confiscated. Hasan Frats, Singer, Goldman, the man who gave them the keys to the garage. 15 defendants, veterans of World War II, were spared execution and instead received 15 years in labor camps. Their empire vanished in a matter of weeks. The mansion was confiscated. The diamonds became state property. The jars were emptied into the treasury. And the Rolls-Royce, it was sold to the very official who had protected them for years for 3,000 rubles. The people who built it all were dead. The man who helped them was now driving their car to work. Here's the thought experiment I can't shake. Imagine that tomorrow the US government bans Amazon, not the company, the concept itself. Online commerce is illegal, home delivery is illegal. Any private transaction outside a state-run store is a federal crime. What happens next? Do Americans suddenly stop wanting things delivered to their doors? No. Within months, underground logistics networks would emerge: illegal warehouses operating at night, encrypted peer-to-peer marketplaces, delivery drivers running routes the government doesn't know about. Demand wouldn't disappear, it would simply lose its legal outlet. And the people who would run that shadow network? They would look exactly like Gaysenfrance and Singer, not criminals by nature, not villains. Just people filling a gap the system created and refused to fill itself. Economists call this the iron law of supply and demand. When demand exists and legal supply is blocked, supply finds another path, always. Gaysenfrance and Singer understood this 40 years before anyone bothered to write it down in a textbook. They paid for that understanding with their lives. But here's the question that stays with me. The system won. It arrested them, tried them, executed them. Took the money, took the houses, erased the names. The system won. And still, the shortages didn't end. The lines didn't get shorter. The state still couldn't produce enough coats. Killing them didn't solve the problem. It only removed the people who had. If you were living in the Soviet Union in 1956, would you have done the same? Yes or no? And now imagine something else. Imagine what would have happened to the people who made this video. If they had made it in 1962, living inside the Soviet Union.